Hello everyone, and welcome to the third part of our series talking about the Budget 101 for the processes of the state budget and the University of Hawaiʻi budget processes. This is the third part of our series. I'm going to talk to you today about the budget processes that relate specifically to the University of Hawaiʻi. However, if this is the first time you're visiting, I would welcome you to check out the other two presentations in the series that help provide a basic primer around the overall budget process, the overall budget structure for the state of Hawaiʻi, and as it relates to the University of Hawaiʻi, to help you better understand some of the complex terms that may arise in the course of this presentation. I'm Kalbert Young. I'm the current Vice President for Budget and Finance and the University of Hawaiʻi Systems Chief Financial Officer. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the budgeting process that is at the University of Hawaiʻi. Many of us who have worked at the University of Hawaiʻi, I know, find the budget process somewhat vague and may not be as familiar about what is required of us as part of the budget process. And certainly, when it comes time to executing or expending monies, those foundations about the budget are particularly important and relevant. So understanding them is also very important. So let's get started. The budget process at the University of Hawaiʻi is actually governed by a number of university policies, regent policies, executive policies, that outline and detail what are the specific processes that we have to go through to get a budget authorized, constructed, considered by the Board of Regents. So I've listed the two most prominent policies here, the regent policy and the executive policy. So let's talk about what is a fiscal budget. What is the fiscal budget at the University of Hawaiʻi? Well, the fiscal budget represents that expenditure plan for each of our campuses and all of the programs that those campuses choose to allocate funds to those individual programs. Now, I frequently refer to this as the spending plan of the university, but actually in the policies that I've listed here on the slide, it's actually the expenditure plan of the university. And that does require approval or authorization by our Board of Regents at the start of the fiscal year. It also is the basis for us to report quarterly to the Board of Regents on our fiscal progress against that budget. How much have we spent? How much it remains? What did we spend it on for the quarter that we report to the Regents? I mentioned both of those things to you because if you are so interested or inclined, you should peruse the Board of Regents website and the materials that are provided to them for their meetings. Every quarter, you will see the financial progress report for operations and for capital projects that the Board of Regents will hear the update as we progress through the fiscal year. This is the general budget construction process at the University of Hawaiʻi. And for those of us who are involved on budgeting, it may seem to us that pretty much the whole year, all 12 months, we are either trying to construct for a future budget or we're trying to construct what is our expenditure plan for the current fiscal year. So it's a never-ending process. And for campuses, they may experience some of that effect when your fiscal officers, your finance officers, your campus chancellors are constantly asking you questions about what your budget is or going to be next year. So the process to construct a budget actually begins in early September, maybe late August. And we, as I speak to you today, 2025, we are right now at that point in time, and we are in the process. So launching with campuses, soliciting ideas about what could be a budget. What do you need to fund your operations. We are talking about a budget for the expenditure plan. We're also going to be talking, though, about a budget for what are we going to ask the legislature in January for the next fiscal year. And so in that regards, sometime in October or November, the State Budget and Finance Director is going to issue budget instructions that departments should utilize as parameters and requirements in constructing our operating budget requests and our capital budget requests. That submittal, though, requires Board of Regents approval because it's actually, by Constitution, the budget request of the University of Hawaiʻi Board of Regents. So in November, the University of Hawaiʻi administration will be taking to the Board of Regents a list of vetted items that we would want for the Board of Regents to approve, submitting to the legislature, submitting to the governor for our next year's budget request. It is still subject to the governor deciding how much or what to include from that request in the governor's executive budget request that is by Constitution required to be submitted to the legislature right around mid-December. All of this is working towards the start of the legislature, which begins in mid-January, will run through the early part of May. All of that is laying the groundwork for the legislature to deliberate and decide how much is going to get funded and for what programs. So it's a very important process for the University of Hawaiʻi for future financial planning. I mentioned our quarterly financial progress reports. This slide here, bullets for you some of the reports that you should expect to see that we are required to provide and helps to show progress and attention to how we actually expend the budget. So the Board of Regents is required to approve our operating request, our operating budget. They are also required to approve our capital improvement budget and our capital improvement requests. And after that occurs and after we have appropriations from the legislature, every quarter we're going to also report on how much progress have we made on the budget for each of those items. Some of the spending plan information that is required include budget worksheets and instructions that get submitted to the campuses for their appropriation, but it also requires explanation about how much is going to be expended for what purpose with some justification for the larger items. The vast majority of the university's budget every year to year is for recurring expenses for existing programs. There's not a whole lot of deviation from that in terms of year to year funding levels. However, we always have new initiatives that we would want to fund, startup of new programs, program augmentations that might be significant and may include a significant amount of budget. Those are the items that the university will want to highlight and point out to the Board of Regents for approval as part of the expenditure plan. I should also talk to you about the reserves of the university. As I talk to you here in 2025, I can tell you the University of Hawaiʻi is a very well endowed financial institution. We have a lot of reserves relative to the size of our operating budget. It's an opportunity for us to be able to deploy capital into new initiatives or strategic programs or initiatives that can help further evolve and expand the university. Those are the types of initiatives that I think of when I mention to you about the Board of Regents approving the expenditure plan. Those are the things that we will want to highlight and identify how our funding commitment of reserves are best used for the expenditure plan. And for our expenditure plan, that is required for the Board of Regents to approve for the current fiscal year. It's based on a number of forecasts and factors, the most significant of which is the amount of legislatively appropriated general funds. It doesn't change all that much from year to year on the operating side, frankly, but it still requires the Board of Regents to approve an expenditure plan after the administration has identified how much general funds have actually been appropriated to the university for which campuses, and to some extent, how the university is going to deploy downstream of the campuses that level of appropriation, and if there are any new initiatives. So that can't start until the conclusion of the legislature, usually at the start of May. Here on this chart is the legislative schedule that where in 2025, the legislature concluded on May 2nd. We then started work in time for the fiscal year to begin on July 1st, but not yet to get enough package to take to the Board of Regents for approval on the expenditure plan for the fiscal year that began after July 1st. That did not occur until September. There's a lot of reasons for that. The large one is that a lot of the revenue stream, even after the general fund appropriation, is still very much assumed and in flux going into September. Enrollment numbers are not yet solidified. So tuition revenues is not yet solidified. It's still somewhat vague. And it gets a little bit clearer the closer we get to census after registration, after the start of the semester. But that's not until well into the fiscal year. So that's why we delay going to the regents until sometime at the earliest possible convenience, which ends up being in September. The Board of Regents have approved the expenditure plan for fiscal year 26, which began in July 1st, 2025. And that includes a forecast for enrollment and tuition revenues. It's based on how much can we believe we are going to collect for revenues from any source, including the general funds, and what we would spend on if we got that level of funding and revenues. Here's a glimpse at the expenditure plan for fiscal year 2026. This is also available for you at the Board of Regents website. If you can find the packet of materials for the expenditure plan, look at the Institutional Success Committee agenda and materials for September, or the Board of Regents packet of materials in September, and you will see a full presentation with another report that is quite lengthy that explains all the components of the expenditure plan for fiscal year 2026. Here on this eye chart, what you should take away is that the University of Hawaiʻi, we are forecasting an operating budget in the neighborhood of about $1.3+ billion across all of our different types of funds and for each of our individual campus or the community college as a system. What you should also take away, though, is if you may have noticed, looking at the totals, that we are forecasting to bring in revenues of $1.33 billion, but that is to fund expenditures of about $1.37 billion, meaning that we plan to expend more money than we will actually bring in as revenues. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And certainly as your finance officer, I would never advise management that that's a sustainable practice. But what this actually is represents a significant amount of investment from our reserves to fund initiatives that we think will be one-time or will be strategic investments to generate future levels of return. Financial returns, student enrollment returns, other qualitative factors returns. So we are demonstrating that we are putting money to work for the benefit of the university and for our students. This expenditure plan does not include research expenditures for extramural grants. So what you see here does include some appropriated federal funding that is direct federal appropriation. It is not extramural awards and expenditures for extramural grants or RCUH funding, for example. When we quarterly report on progress, there are a number of items that we're going to report on. So you should be aware of these as campus leadership members. What is the Board of Regents or the general public going to see in terms of the financial progress report? Here I'm showing you the different components. I talked a little bit about them in terms on the revenue side, the different components on the revenue report. On the expenditure side, there is a fair amount more of granularity, though, than the expenditure report, the expenditure plan itself presents. When we quarterly report on fiscal financial progress, we also report on how much of the progress and the budget was expended towards salaries or towards utilities or equipment and other areas. Salaries is the number one expense at the University of Hawaiʻi. It represents upwards of 70+% of any budget at any campus will be towards salaries. That is the expectation. That's the norm. For some campuses, it may be more than that. But in general, on average, that's what we presume is the rate of expenditures, and it is the number one expense, salaries. To conclude this presentation, I want to show you this graph and relay to you, you should be confident and comfortable in the University of Hawaiʻi as an institution, as your employer, as an institution for all of us as Hawaii residents. This graph here shows you the trend of how much general funds has been appropriated to the university over the last 10 years against how much tuition revenues have actually been earned and appropriated, expended at the University of Hawaiʻi. Both of these satisfy the lion's share of operating at the University of Hawaiʻi. When you look at this graph here, you'll notice that for the last 10 years, tuition revenue has largely been pretty static, almost the same across those 10 years. A good portion of that is due to a tuition rate schedule that didn't reflect any increases for almost 5 years. And when tuition rate increases have been implemented, they've been very small. It's also been weighted by our enrollment trends. Some campuses have better enrollment growth than others. Some campuses have experienced enrollment declines on a more sustained basis. All of that goes into the mix about how much tuition revenues have been collected. General funds, though, have been somewhat varied, trending upward across the 10 years, certainly, and that's a good thing. The University of Hawaiʻi receives a significant amount of general fund support relative to our budget. It puts the University of Hawaiʻi system in what I would guess is as much as the top third of all state-funded systems or institutions across the country, maybe even within the top 10%. It's a very enviable amount of funding that the university has, but it is not consistent, and it has not been consistent if you look at this chart. There have been points where funding has declined. And I would tell you, if you could see this chart for the 10 years prior, I started at the university in 2015. So this chart shows you the progress since I've been here, coincidentally. However, when I used to show this chart when I started, the graph trend line was in the opposite direction. In 2012 to 2014, around that time period, due to state recession in the economy at that time, state departments, including the University of Hawaiʻi, actually experienced a decline in general fund appropriation support. At the University of Hawaii, it was about $95 million in 2 years worth of reductions. So when you ran this chart, if you looked at this one right now, you would probably come to the conclusion, oh no, the trend is up. It's moving in the right direction, upwards. That's a good thing. But if I showed you the chart 10 years prior, the trend would be going down and we would feel, hey, we're being defunded. The amount that was reduced in 2011, 12 to 14 actually were at levels that are reflected on this graph in 2021. So that means that it took almost 10 years for the University of Hawaii to get to the same level of general fund appropriations as the prior peak, which was back in 2012 to 2014. 10 years to recover them. Here on this chart that you're looking at, it says, oh, it looks like it's been growing ever since. Yes, but from the lowest point on this chart, 10 years prior, we actually moved down to that point. And the amounts that we've received in general funds in 2021 actually don't take into account the growth of inflation over that same period of time. Most of the increases in general funds that the university gets from year to year is actually driven by collective bargaining increases, not by funding of new initiatives or additional programs at the university. There are some of those, but by and large, all of the growth in general funds that the university experiences from year to year, largest part is due to the legislature appropriating monies to meet scheduled collective bargaining increases. Put all together, I will tell you as your finance officer that I continue to feel that the University of Hawaii and the state of Hawaii is in a good place as we stand in 2025. The level of funding, although has some variability and may not be the best that it could be, it is still at levels that the university can do a lot with, and that the state of Hawaii can demonstrate its support for the University of Hawaii going forward. And if you've made it this far in this presentation, I commend you. You finished 3/4 of our series. There's one more left related to bonds, which is probably the most difficult for you to understand or to sit through for most people. So if you can make it to that presentation, I will congratulate you and commend you for your courage and bravery. And if you haven't seen the first 2 parts of this series, I would actually invite you to go back and look for those. It will help provide you additional information that you've seen today, help shape and better inform you for some of the items that we just talked about. So thank you very much.